the first thing that John Kerrin told me was something to the effect that, look, Brian, I do not want to hear all my options. I want to know the answer. You know, don't pull this academic sort of stuff with me where you give me 5 options and I've got to choose. I want you to tell me what the best answer is. And that the books don't say that, basically. The books say, all the textbooks say, you know, the bureaucrat's job is to weigh up the options, give the decision maker in the end is the minister, and of course the cabinet minister is the decision maker, and finally the cabinet, of course. But ministers don't normally want to know 20 different things that they could do.
Does that experience generalise? Do you think other ministers also feel the same way?
I think they do, yeah. And the other thing that became immediately apparent to me was the power of numbers. The person with the number basically holds the power. So, and
you don't mean numbers of people on your side, you mean actual evidence type numbers.
Actual evidence type numbers. So, you know, the ministers like to know what it's going to cost them, or, you know, what's the wheat price next year, or all sorts of things, of course, that economists can't possibly know. But here's the expert, you're the expert, I'm the minister, you're supposed to know these things, tell me.
Are there any other sort of key events? You were quite heavily involved in climate change policy for a while there, I seem to remember.
Yeah, well, I think the other big areas that ABARE had a strong influence in whilst I was the executive director were the trade negotiations, and including the accession of China to the WTO, which is a big deal back then, but both a big deal for China and the world, actually. So all of the work we did around trade policy and trade reform, I think that was quite important and quite influential at the time. And the climate debate, which is ongoing, of course, and will be ongoing for a long time, I suspect, that also played an important, that was a big part of what ABARE was asked to do. Basically, we provided the empirical backing for Australia's climate negotiations on the run-up to Kyoto and beyond. We built the models, we did the work. I participated in the negotiations, and so that was for probably 5 or 6 years, that was a very, very strong focus of what the Bureau did. Not to the exclusion of everything else we did, of course, but it was a strong focus.
I think you once told me that a really significant policy change is a 20-year endeavour. Does that sound right? Is that?
Yeah, or 25 years. I think that was one of Keith Campbell's observations. Right. That he used to tell his students that from when you have a good policy idea to when it's likely to be implemented is at least 25 years. Yeah. So, you know, don't expect that you're going to have an instant impact on policy the moment you think you've had a good idea, assuming, of course, that you have in fact had a good idea.
Yes, yes. And so with your 18-year experience in ABARE, does that stack up, do you think, the 25-year rule of thumb?
I think that's about right. Yeah. You know, if you think about the period between when people were debating about whether we needed a wheat board, and that goes back to wheat quotas and all sorts of things, really, to when the wheat board finally was reformed. Yeah. then 25 years is about the number.
Yes, okay. So we might have a bit more time with climate policy.
Well, you see, I think
Be more than 25.
Yeah, I think climate policy is much more intractable. I mean, domestic policy potentially not necessarily, but international climate policy is extremely intractable because you've got 197 signatories to the Paris Accord,
Yes.
and we don't even have a rules of procedure under the UN Convention on Climate Change, which means that everything has to be done by consensus. And you cannot agree the rules of procedure because it has to be agreed by consensus, and nobody, everybody won't agree even to a rules of procedure. So when you've got that sort of problem, trying to get decisions on that will have a direct impact on the structure of economies is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Particularly when you've got a convention set up that divides up developed countries from developing countries, and some of the developing countries actually have higher per person incomes than a bunch of countries in the developed category. Yet the convention has divided those two sets up and effectively means that one set has to do more than the other set, even though that's not fair. So, once you've got that sort of problem, it becomes very, very difficult.
Yes, okay. So beyond ABARE, what did you do after that?
Well, I became a consultant. So I moved to a company called CRA International, which is a Boston-based consulting firm, and I think that was anybody that wants to become a consultant. It's always easier to move into an established firm and learn how it's done, basically, because as an academic, you've got academic or a public servant, you've got not too much idea about what market consulting rates look like, how big consulting firms work. So
you're still in consulting. Are you with a firm now, or are you on your own, or with a partnership or something?
I basically I run something called BA Economics.
BAE?
Yeah, BAE. And basically nowadays I am pretty much by myself, but I have a bunch of associates. So we do work on the basis that if there's specialist things that I can do by myself, then I do those. If I need help, I subcontract modelling or other expertise on an as-needs basis.